So I'd like to explain how we got here. It was 5 years ago, midnight mass. Here at the cathedral, we're getting ready, and Father Lee and I are vesting, and Father Lee looks at me and says, "Hey, happy birthday to the cathedral. She turns 90 tonight." What? Because this is the stuff that Father Lee would know. Yeah. Well, it began a train of thought. 90 years old, and started thinking about, well, what do we do when we hit the centennial? Because a place like a cathedral is a major location for history and meaning for a diocese. And you just look here in Crest Hall, there are all of these pictures of the bishops. There's all sorts of history that's rooted in this space and place over time. So my mind began to leap to how would we celebrate for a centennial? Things like all school class reunions, concerts throughout a whole year, special prayers, special masses, pilgrimages to the cathedral, to be able to do a beautiful display perhaps of all the relics that we have here at the cathedral, and to give people an opportunity to pray and reflect and draw deeper into their faith, and also into the history of the church here in northern Wisconsin. All of that's the fun part. But there was another train of thought that began, and it's going to be a 100-year-old building. 100-year-old buildings need serious, tender, loving care. So we began to pull a lot of people together. We referred to the Building and Grounds Committee, and they've been working tirelessly to vet out what are key projects that need to get done. We pulled in the Finance Council about the money we would need and how we would allocate resources. Parish Council, key members of our staff, key volunteers in the parish, and then resources from the larger community to give us real numbers and run these numbers down to see we need to give people a real sense of what's the cost to take care of this treasure that we have and set it up for the future. As we did that, two principles just leapt up to the surface. The first is what's urgent, like what needs to be taken care of for safety, security. What are the things that are really pressing concerns? That's the first thing. But then the second is, what are important things that we better attend to so they don't become big problems and big expenses? In other words, we want to anticipate the challenges before they become out of control expenses. So what's urgent, what's important, and we frame that. That led us then to 7 projects. Now, I want to just say a word. Would you all open your brochures? It's page 5. I want to explain something here. So first off, in just a moment, when I'm done speaking, Charles is going to come up. And for those of you who are watching, this is the packet we're talking about. Inside there's a brochure and some other information. This brochure, if you would like to get a copy at home about what we're talking about and how we're referring to this, I need you to please email our cathedralcentennial@gmail.com. I believe that's going to be flashing up through the memo line on the feed throughout the presentation tonight, but cathedralcentennial@gmail.com. If you email us, we'll gladly send you this so you can read about it and learn more. And there are many of you out there who I know have become a part of our extended family. So this is available to you, and that's what I'm going to be speaking to the folks about. Now, the projects at the top of the list in phase 1, clearly urgent, that we want to get knocked out next year. Start with the parking lot and the concrete work around the cathedral. Our parking lot is in desperate need, and you just need to take a good look when you go back out to your cars and you check out the blacktop, its structure. But we also have some real challenges with a lot of the concrete that is beginning to fail. If you come up the steps on Belknap Avenue, you'll see where rebar is coming through. If you look at the plaza, you'll see all sorts of places where that has failed completely. We have problems with the sidewalk in different places where it's crumbling. We need to address that. But furthermore, this would give us an opportunity to correct 2 big things that would allow for safety and access. Call your attention to the elevator door that we use for everybody who has special needs. Right now, that elevator door is a very steep slope relative to anybody who's trying to use a wheelchair. I had a wedding a couple weeks ago, and a guy in a wheelchair said, "Hey, Father, I'm glad you got a ramp, but if you want, you can hop in my wheelchair, wheel yourself up that thing, hit the button, and see how it works for you at that slope." And for those of you who've used that ramp, going up is one thing, going down is another, because if it gets wet and a little frost, a little cold in superior climate, it's a little ski slope. And we have had people fall, and we got to correct that. So what we would do is we would change this process up, and instead of it having coming down straight onto the fire lane, we do a switchback. And we extend the length and allow us to have a much safer ADA compliant grade that instead of emptying out onto the fire lane, it empties out into the nice flat area here in the front. Easier to maintain, safer, and a slope that is much more easy on anybody who needs that access into the elevator. In addition, there's a second thing. For those who try to park in the handicapped spaces that we have, and they have mobility issues, and they're driving, 8 months out of the year, they open their door into a snowbank or into mud because it's parallel parking on that side. What we would do is change that and extend the fire lane out and turn it into parallel parking. The good news is we can plow it. Did I say thank you for catching that? It's been a long day. Diagonal parking, which would allow us to plow this and also add a couple more spaces that we currently have. And what's more, it will allow us further to maybe add some larger spaces for special vehicles that have wheelchair ramps and or access. In other words, it will increase the spaces, allow better access, and be safer for people in all seasons and climate. That's a particularly pressing issue that I keep seeing over and over again. I think about when we do funeral processions. I think about when we are trying to get people who really want to come into church, but they have access issues, and this would dramatically improve that situation for us. All of that's in phase one. Phase one also includes the lighting in the cathedral. The light system that we have was installed 20 years ago when the cathedral went through its enhancement and renovation. And LED technology was greatly limited at that time. It's come a long way. And what we found is that many of the fixtures that we currently have are slowly being phased out. They're not being made anymore. And so certain types of like halogen lamps, okay, they don't make them. So what we would do is take this as an opportunity to switch over to a safer, cooler, longer lasting, more energy efficient LED technology. That would be also the switch. And we're kind of pressed for time because as these lamps and bulbs burn out, it's getting harder and harder to find replacements. So we would switch the whole system, and that's where that particular part of phase one would also be included. We include our Catholic Services Appeal, because this year we will roll that into the campaign. The CSA will come back next year. And then, in addition, we've also added the cost for being able to run a capital campaign like this. Again, for utter transparency, that you see what the costs are to make all of this happen, to share our vision, explain how we get home, and talk about why we do what we do. That's all phase one. And it runs that $1,174,000, call it 1.2. $1.2 million. That would be phase one, essential things, urgent that we get on top of. Now, phases 2 and 3 are things that we've identified as important, but we'd like to get them scheduled. So let's talk about phase 2. We want to repair, reseal, and restore the exterior stonework. We have a sandstone facing on the cathedral. It's beautiful, but when water gets behind that, it hits the iron where the stone is affixed, it expands and contracts over the seasons, and it does this. These chips, maybe you've never seen them, but I tell you what, after tonight you can't not see them. We've got about 80 of them so far. And they start slowly, but what happens is you can tell. First you'll see the stonework, and then you'll start to see these tiny spider-like hairlines that'll be formed, and then you'll start to see the outline, and then you'll start to see the things start to move out, and then they drop. This one conveniently fell 2 weeks ago just for this presentation. But again, we have about 80 of them so far. We've inspected the building, taken a drone around the entire building, have photographed it, and been able to begin to identify, obviously, the big issues, but also where they're starting to form. And I would just invite you to take a look and go out next time you're walking in and out at daylight and see it. Because once you see it, you can't not. We want to get on top of this. We want to be able to prevent as much of the further weathering that can happen. This will always be a problem. We're always going to have to deal with it. But this is a good time to say we want to get ahead of the game, anticipate more of the issues, and get it sealed up. The next part is sound and video. Now for this, I get to look at you folks, because COVID changed the game. When we started live streaming on March 18th of 2020, our development director, Jessica, wave your hand, Jess, had her job description completely rewritten because we had to figure out from square one how to keep people connected when everything got shut down. And it was awful. 77 days, I was staring at that phone. And thank God we had the technology, but you have to imagine, I'm on one side of the altar, Jess is on the other side. We took a music stand, flattened it out, wobbly thing, put a couple of hymnals on it. She's got a little stand and she's balancing on the book, trying to keep the thing stable, because it's all we had. Now, we've learned a lot, and we've tried our best to be able to help not only the folks who are watching right now, and not only many of you who are tuning in during that crazy time. At the height of the lockdown, on Easter Day, 2020, 35,000 people watched the 8:30 morning mass. I was dead tired, and I just was looking into that screen. But 35,000 people, because what else did we have? It was our lifeline. And you know, I'm looking at Deacon Dan. I mean, it's one of those surreal experiences in the life of my priesthood. And yet to be able to be all alone in a space, and yet to know that there were people reaching out to us. And for those of you who've been with us for 2.5 years, for those of you this has been a great connection, because maybe you couldn't get to Mass, maybe there are health issues, mobility issues, work schedules, maybe it's weather that just drives you to distraction. The fact is that we've been able to do this. Well, now we have some opportunities to raise the game, because the sound system, the speakers in the cathedral are starting to fail. And as they fail, we're having more problems about how to get the sound out. And we have all sorts of blessings in the cathedral, but we have to upgrade the sound system. We did work before COVID with the guts, the electronics, but now we gotta work on the speakers. Well, if we're gonna have all of this cable pulled for speakers, we'd also pull video. So we would create an integrated system that would work far beyond the iPhones that we're using, and be able to create something that has really a good sophistication at a much more reasonable price. Again, COVID advanced the technology and reduced the costs simultaneously. So we would take advantage of it. We'd have to do the work for our sound. We'd pull the video and create an integrated system that would do two key things. It would improve the sound in the church, but it would also improve the sound quality online, because it would be integrated to the microphones. So what goes into the lapel mic, what goes in at the ambo or at the cantor mic would be heard effortlessly, no echo. So for people who are hearing impaired who are watching online, a dramatic improvement, but would still keep a close proximity, because we'd have cameras that would be zoomed in to different places in the church. It'd be a powerful way for us to continue to provide access, but also enhance the sound in the church. That leads then to the elevator. Our elevator was installed in 1989. Works great. Hydraulics are good, the box is good, but the electronics are from 1989. They're not sustained anymore. Simply put, they don't make them. There's a few components left out on shelves, but the fact of the matter is, when these parts go down, we can't get replacements. So the cost here that we have would be bringing us up to a modern electronic component system to operate the elevator. Finally, the air conditioning. The air conditioning units, there's 4 units, they're yoked in pairs. And one of the sets has failed. It failed a few years ago. So we're really operating in the cathedral at 50% of our air conditioning capacity. Now, the coolant on that system is R22, which we're told now is being phased out. And so when that system does, it's a 20-year-old system, mind you, it was installed during the enhancement. When that system fails, we're going to have to upgrade. So again, it's something that we want to put on the radar. If we can raise the money for it, we can get it fixed and installed at a time that makes sense for the life and cycle of the cathedral. and not find ourselves in emergency planning if the thing goes out right before summer starts and we haven't got a game plan. This would allow us to be proactive and prudent. That's phase two. That's another $610,000 in those projects. Now again, we've run down most of these numbers with current contractors and vendors that we work with. And so these numbers are at least to give us a good sense and a good handle on where we are right now. The last issue is the roof. The cathedral roof is a series of interlocking clay tiles. And the fact is that, generally speaking, they do work pretty well, but they're individual clay tiles, fastened with fasteners that are 95 years old. So what happened was, we kind of were alerted to the gravity of what was coming. A few years ago, you liked the pun, didn't you? Thank you. Yeah. We were alerted to the problem pre-COVID when the bell tower clay tiles, which had been exposed to the most elements from the most directions, were seriously failing. They were falling from the bell tower to the upper story and then down to the ground. So we're finding clay tiles on the ground. Now we find clay tiles on the ground almost every year because the nature of these things are, weather gets tough on them. We inspect the roof every year. We replace tile every year. We've got to fix it. But this began to clue in that when we looked at the top of the bell tower, it's hard to get to. And so we had to come up with a solution. And we went with a metal cap, metal roof. Here's why. If you look at much of the cathedral, it's already metalled. The whole back of the cathedral, the apses, and the lower story is all metal. So we were looking at what our options would be. We could take that upper story, because here's the other thing, folks. As the tiles had fallen, we had to repair the upper story, and we saw that there's a lot of loose tiles, and we're going to have a lot of problems coming down the road unless we make a plan. So we chose to say, okay, do we fix it as it is? Do we take all those clay tiles off, fix the sub-roof, and then bring all those tiles back up, refix them, secure them, and make it like it is? You could do it. It'd be very expensive. The labor and the location make this a lot higher than the $300,000+ we've got for a metal roof. 2 to 3 times higher. Now, the issue was we already have metal on a whole lot of this thing. So we were looking at being able to give people some concrete numbers to work with, to be able to say, here's what it would take to get us into something that at least would be at a base level, sturdy, practical, a lot easier to maintain, and that we can have, like we do every year, people up on it to inspect it, check it out, and look at it. This is definitely a project that is going to require us to roll up our sleeves and get into. But again, we wanted to share with you how to be proactive and anticipate what could be a very big problem in the years to come before it becomes a big problem. These 3 phases then are all of our projects summed up, and that gets us to the $2.1 million. Now, something I need to share with you is that as we do each of these projects, we have an established process here at Cathedral for all of our work. Now, you folks can't see it, but all of you can. We put together a list, just top of mind issues for the last 10 years, work that we have knocked out and got completed here at the Cathedral. And it's an impressive list, along with the pictures that go with it. I invite you to check it out. I invite you to look at how we've been pretty darn good stewards of the money entrusted to us to get work done, to be able to create a space and keep up this space so that it can serve us and take care of us. But the process that we have, when we take these projects, first off, we've got our building and grounds, our finance people, and we have, wherever it's available, we do competitive bids. That's just standard diocesan policy, where we bring people together along a common scope of work, they look at it, they bid it, and then we have our bid committee review it. And we're able to say we want the best value. So sometimes that means that we really have to look at the whole project, but to do so to say, how do we take the money that we've raised and use it to the best quality for the good of the people who are using the cathedral? So we work that whole process through, and then when we say this is who we've chosen, that's when Bishop Powers then signs off, because he's going to want to know how many people have looked at this, how many people have reviewed it, what are your principles, what are your priorities, and how do you expect it to get done? And when he has that answer, then it's signed off and out we go. We're big on value. And then we continue to communicate it. Something that I just ran the numbers is that, twice a year here at the Cathedral we do reports. We do a mid-year report and a state of the Cathedral. It includes the finances. It includes some of the key things that we're working on, key projects. And we allow that to go out so that you stay informed. You know what our budgets are. You know how we came in each year with finances. You know the key elements that we've handled. We make sure that for transparency's sake, you know what's going on, you know what we're knocking out, and you know the timeline to do it. And that will continue with these big projects. We'll keep people informed. I like using the reports when the state of the Cathedral and the mid-year, because it's in print, everybody sees the same information at about the same time. Because I know sometimes at Mass, what I say from the pulpit, it's like a game of telephone. And sometimes what I say changes, but I think as the people share it, it goes around them. This way we can always go back to, no, here's what it was, here's how it was written, here's what we said. And we can go back 10 years to be able to say, this is how we communicate, and we will continue to communicate. Now, that brings us then to this campaign. And in order to talk about that, it's important that we recognize that for 95 years so far, a whole lot of people have been making sacrifices. This church was built in 1927, and then the Great Depression hit. And people went through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. And after the big economic post-war boom, the city of Superior had some tough times in the 80s when all sorts of economies went sideways. The Cathedral family hung in there. The Cathedral Church has remained steadfast. The community has been tight and been committed to serving people from a wide range of different backgrounds. And that's the beauty of having a cathedral family. But when I think about their sacrifices, it reminds me that, we're all called to make sacrifices, to be proactive stewards, to stretch the buck as far as we can, to get the best value, and to hang in there and keep just picking away at stuff. We get it done as we can, and we continue to take care of what we have. We take care of this cathedral so she can take care of us, for baptisms and weddings and funerals, for masses and prayers. We take care of this cathedral so that we have that house for our family to gather and to pray and reach out. Now, I've been using the word sacrifice a lot. And you know what? It doesn't have any meaning until I'm willing to put it into practice. And folks, I've been praying on this in preparation for this campaign. And I can't ask anybody here or anybody in the extended family to even consider a sacrificial gift unless I'm willing to show by example. So after a lot of prayer, I'm offering 1 year's salary from the cathedral, which is $40,000 of my salary, to this campaign. It's my sacrifice. Now I want to make it clear, everybody's got their own math. And everybody's got to kind of sharpen the pencil and figure out, what's going on in their lives. And I did that. And I want to just be able to say that I love being here. I love being with all of you. I love being able to share with all of you the gift that we have here. That way I can at least say, I'm asking you to consider what that sacrifice would look like in your mathematics. What that sacrifice would look like with your schedules and structures and needs. Every day I thank God that I get to be the rector of the cathedral. I really do. 14 years now. And I am absolutely thrilled to be a part of this project, this community. I've been so overwhelmed over the years by the generosity and support of so many. I know that the only way this happens is when everybody works together. The only way this happens is when people shoulder to shoulder, side by side, join hands and say, let's do what we can. Great and small, as Ken said. Every gift matters. Every gift is crucial. Every gift allows us to, when we put it all together, be cathedral. And be that family, both present and extended, that allows us to continue to share the good news. I know that, we need gifts at every level, great and small. And I know that it only works when everybody does their part. So I'm asking you all to prayerfully consider making a sacrificial gift for this crucial work. And again, for those of you who'd like, you can always get a brochure from us. Just email us at cathedralcentennial@gmail.com. I want to thank you all for coming out and for your time. I'd like to now invite Charles to come on up.